Morning, everyone. Um,
Yes.
a little bit about me, myself. I'm Prathamesh, and I've been working with Technologize for past 4 years now. I've been working in the IT industry for more than 9 years, and I've been working in different technologies and different technical architectures from monolith, microservices, serverless, and so on. And recently, we had a chance, and a main part of our project was to focus on this topic which we are going to cover today. And yeah, I am just trying to share my knowledge and my experience here with everyone. So the agenda would be first discuss what are web vitals for those who don't know. What are the business impact that is it is going to make, and it does make, and some of the case studies inside that, some of the real competitors or players who tried to improve the performance metrics, and what happened. Then we will directly dive into the actual core web vital metrics, and uh, and then try to understand what are the causes of the poor scores of those each metrics, and how to improve them. Uh, okay, so that's the agenda here. Yeah. So what are Web Vitals? It is an initiative by Google, um, and they had a proper research team just to understand the metrics of your page performance and how they affect the user experience. So basically, these Web Vitals will be totally focusing on the user experience on the web. It is relevant to all the web pages across web. Uh, Next important thing is it is a unified guidance for quality metric. So basically, what does this mean is they have come up with uh, some metrics which they think that these are most important metrics which shows the quality of your web page. That is why these matter. And as users, we just have to focus on these metrics and not many more. While we are improving these metrics, we have to touch upon many things that to improve the performance. But yeah, that's the whole point here, that it has a unified guidance for anyone, because it is assuming that not everyone is expert at improvement of performance and optimization. That is why it has given us some sort of guidance. So those are web vitals. Let's try to understand what is the business impact that it is going to make. So right now we all know that Google's ranking for your website has multiple parameters. When your specific link will come on top of the search results and those kind of things, we have to do those for sure, like SEO optimizations and all those things. In addition to that, in addition to your even content relevancy of the for the search results, this would be your page for experience score would be the tiebreaker. It will act as a tiebreaker for the same competitors which are generating the similar content. So I think this is very important, where there are multiple brands who are generating similar content, but they want their content to come on top of most of the competitors. So let's try to understand what people have already done and how it has affected them. These are some of the case studies. So Nykaa found that 40% improvement in LCP led to 20% more organic traffic. So there are some metric names here which we are going to cover in the later slides. But let's just try to understand that by improvement of some metric, they gained some amount of traffic. So that's the main takeaway here. Next, Flipkart achieved 2.6% of reduction in bounce rate. I hope everyone knows bounce rate is here. What bounce rate is here? Basically, how much time and how much the user spends on your website is important for every business, and everyone tries to reduce that bounce rate by the user going out of the website. So that was reduced by 2.6% by Flipkart by just improving their core web vital metrics.
So
Same thing goes for.
Mean that the bounce rate, by that do you mean that the people who actually come to your website and then bounce out of it,
Exactly.
that should be reduced?
Yes.
So that's basically bounce. Okay.
Yes, for every business, most of the every business wants the users to remain on their site as much time as possible. They don't want to bounce off or not even convert to. So that's the main important metric from any business perspective. Same goes with AliExpress. They just improved CLS by 10 times and LCP by double, which translated to like literally 15% of less bounce rates. Again, this creates much of much of your users towards your business. So this is again important here. This CLS and LCP again we are going to cover in the next slides. So just hold on. And there are many more examples. You can just go on Google's website to know more. So these are main metrics which boil down to these three specific parameters of judging performance of a web page. These three focus on three different things. One is LCP, which is largest contentful paint, which is perceived load speed. It defines how fast your page loads for the user. We don't care how if your whole website whole web page is downloaded or no, or there are some background things happening or no. How this page is perceived by the user matters most. So these all metrics are very much user focused, user experience focused. So this matters here. That is why it is called perceived load speed. The next one is FID, which is first input delay. This judges the responsiveness of the web page. Again, this is directly attached. This is directly tied down to the user. So this matters here again. The third one is CLS, which is cumulative layout shift, which is visual stability. How visually stable is your web page when it loads, which improves the user experience of the user. Okay, so let's move on to understand how are these measured, because that matters. There are two ways that these metrics are measured. One is in the field, and what in the field means, it understands which are the users who visit to your website. What is their network condition? Are they even interacting or no? Using all these metrics, which are real time, they come up with the metric score. So this is called in the field measurement. Any questions on this?
Yes. How do you do it? I mean, real user monitoring, how do you actually perform?
Okay, so there are 2-3 ways that Google Chrome does it. We will focus that on later as well. We will list down the specific tools. and then we can discuss that.
Sure, sure.
Yeah. So this is in the field. Just keep in mind that this is in the field, which matters, where the real user monitoring matters. Next is in the lab. It is measured before the feature even goes to production, where basically this is like a dev kind of a setup where we try to understand what is the how our page is performing before even going live and before the real users interact with it. Because in sometimes we cannot just focus on in the field metrics. We have to go to see how a new web page will perform when it goes to the production. So this is the different type of measurement which is measured in the lab. So let's try to understand which are the metrics here, which are the performance metrics tools here. For lab tools, there are multiple tools, which is Chrome browser dev tools. If you see, there is a performance tab in your dev tools. You can see there as well. Second, you can see the measurement of your web page on the Lighthouse plugin. Lighthouse plugin is a client-side plugin, so that is why you can just see what your local web browser or web page will perform. So that is there. Again, web page test is again a website which lets you test on specific browser or given specific network condition or given specific location. We will not go into depth of these things, but we will try to focus on only one specific tool here, which is PageSpeed Insights, which is in this list. These are field tools. Coming back to you, Harshad, Chrome user experience reports. So there are multiple ways that we can find out actual field tools, and one is to generate the Chrome user experience report. This is generated and reported by Google Chrome. So whenever a user interacts with your web page, Google Chrome actually sends some of these metrics to its Google Chrome user experience site, and then you can generate the report out of it. We are not going to in depth to understand that, but there is a very simple way to just understand Chrome user experience report for any domain. You can just follow some simple steps and just see the report there. There is one more way you can see, which is Search Console. This is again a different tool used to understand the performance report here. This basically is a totally different dashboard where you have to register your domain. Example, technologize.com. You will register your domain as technologize.com, and you can see a range of reports there gathered by Google Chrome, as well as the crawl report of the Google search. So I'm not going in depth of that as well, because it needs some sort of setup, and then you can just see the report. It's again a different tool. There is one more Web Vitals JS library as well, which just reads some of the metrics, whichever you want to read, and then send it to any other analytical tool, whichever you want to use of your choice, and you can do this as well. If you don't want to use Google's Search Console, or if you don't want to use Google's Chrome user experience report. There is one more tool, which is PageSpeed Insights, which is widely used, and I would prefer you guys also can use any to test any web page that you want. and we are going to use this tool specifically throughout this webinar. So Harshad, do you have any questions on this?
Yeah, I do. I never used Chrome User Experience Report.
Okay.
And is it the same name? Tool name is same, Chrome User Experience Report.
Yes.
We can get it on Google.
Yes, you can get it on Google. It's called CRUX. CR
Okay.
is C is capital, R is small, and UX is capital again.
Right.
Yeah.
That's it.
So this is generally a higher level report. So you can just understand how much percentage of pages of your domain pass certain metrics. So like 30% of your web page pass LCP, or 30% of your pages are in good performance of your LCP, and 20% are in bad level of your LCP score. So in that sort of reporting it does. If you want to go in detail, Search Console is better. If you just want to,
use that.
Okay.
One more question: how it is field tools? I mean, these are also labs tools, except that user experience I don't know about. Search Console is something that user comes into our website and then Search Console tells us.
Yes.
So that is how you are telling it is field?
Yes.
Okay. And page speed inside is again, I think, is it lab or is it page field tool? Because
gives you both.
Speed.
So
okay.
Yeah, I have it open here. Can you see this?
Yeah.
So I have already ran a specific for this specific page, and this is the report. So you can see the field data here. You can see the lab data here for mobile, for desktop as well. For people who are new, you can just see this. We will go in detail and try to understand what these specific metrics mean. You just have to understand right now that this field data means that this is the actual user's device and network conditions and location matter here. And lab data is nothing but when I ran just now, what was the score? That is it. So this is the main distinction here. Got it, Harshad?
Yeah.
Okay, I think Shailesh has asked question. Yes. Yeah, we'll get a recording. Cool. Okay. So I think let's go in depth of every metric here. First one is LCP, which is largest contentful paint, which again tells you how your page load speed is basically. Before that, just try to understand what is the statistic here. So there is a report of HTTP Archive, which reported that 47% of desktop websites and 57% of mobile apps must improve their LCP. Basically, half of the existing websites have LCP metrics score more than 2.5 seconds, which is bad. So this is the current situation of our internet right now, and whoever is the content creator, whoever is the owner of that website is told by Google that they need to improve this score because in future Google will make this overall core web vitals more important or more relevant for the scoring as well. So yeah, let's try to understand what is largest contentful metric, contentful paint metric. It reports the render time of the largest image or text block visible within the viewport relative to when the page first started loading. Let me repeat again. This metric is nothing but the render time of the largest image or the text block visible within the viewport. relative to when the page first started loading. So what it means is it identifies there is a specific metric here, there is a specific algorithm here, how this largest image or text block is identified. And it tries to understand how much time it took for that specific largest image or that specific largest text block to load after it started loading the first content. Okay, I'm spending just a little bit more time here so that everyone understands this definition. Then we can go ahead. Any question till now? Does everyone get an idea?
Pratish, one question.
Mm-hmm.
So this LCP is measured in seconds, is it?
Yes.
Okay. And this largest, largest image or text block. So what is largest over here? The size or the
Correct. Size. It is the size.
Okay.
And within the viewport here matters, because viewport means this whatever the user can see when he just goes and visits the page. Right. So example, this is the web page, and if I just close this is the viewport. The LCP will be measured or identified only from this content, not from anything else.
Yeah.
And then what is the difference between first meaningful content and largest meaningful content then? Because and the first meaningful content is again which comes on the viewport.
Correct. So most of the things, these metrics only focus on the viewport only, because that's what first the user sees. Okay, so that's continuous for all the metrics. Now, from what you meant is first meaningful content is a different type of algorithm that it tries to understand which is the meaningful content, but it does not tells you how fast the page was. It does not tells you anything. So they came up with this new metric which can tell you that how much time it took from first content to paint, which can be anything in this case, which can be just this text, and how much time it took to load the largest content, which in this case is this image. I'll show you how I found out. So this is the LCP here. This is the largest content which it registered. So that time matters for the user from the user's perspective. Right, Harsha?
Right.
Yeah. So that is the main difference. Let's try to understand which are the elements considered here. One is the image element. The normal image element can be considered as can be considered in your largest content, video, and any element which has background image, and all of your block level elements. Block level elements means your P, span, H1, anything which will just contain your text. Okay. To summarize this, there are three major things that it tries to identify as the largest content, which is image, video, and text. Okay. So now the question is how does it try to understand which is the largest element here? One is, like we discussed, it tries to understand which is the largest element which is inside the viewport. Again, this matters. Second is, if even it is partially visible, it will not be reported. Like in this image, you can see the bottom image is there, but it is partially loaded. It is partially visible in the viewport. So it is not reported or even counted as the LCP. Does that clear?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Okay, let's try to understand what is a good LCP score here. So this is what Google has said, that if the LCP is from 0 to 2.5 seconds, it's considered as good. More than that, it will always need improvement, and about more than 4 seconds is considered totally poor. This affects in the again, I'm mentioning here, this affects in the ranking of the search console, search results here. So you have to make sure that all your pages, 75% of your pages are in at least in good range. So 0 to 2.5 seconds is considered okay. Now let's try to understand what are the causes of poor LCP score. This is the high level main causes of poor LCP score, which is slower server response time, render blocking JS and CSS, and slow resource load times. What do you understand by slower server response time? We'll go in detail of one by one. But first, let's try to understand what is slower server response time, and then see how to improve that. So if we divide the time here, one is after the server has returned a specific HTML or whatever the resources, and then browser taking time to render the page, and the before is like I said, the actual server response time that it needs to serve the.
Yeah, I think there is a two times. There is one latency time and the other is response time.
Exactly.
So response time will be the computation time. How much time it takes to compute that to compute that response, and the other, which is takes time within two endpoints.
Right.
Yeah. So total of that, it's response time, I think. Total response time.
So here we are trying to understand just the server response time.
Okay.
And in the bottom, like you said, these focus on the client side rendering time. Okay. So yeah, let's just focus on server response time here. So how to find out if your server is taking more time? So this is the this is a website that I'm trying to debug here. What we want to understand is if the server is taking more time or no. First, try to understand that. And let's see. Here, the performance tab, go to performance tab and just click on start profiling and reload page. When I do this, wait for 2-3 seconds. Stop. This is one of the tools that you can use to debug exactly what is wrong with your page. So if your LCP score is poor, these are the things that you have to try to understand and try to see what is happening. So even before the performance, let's go to network and let's try to see yeah. So this is the main document. This is the HTML document that loaded. And as you can see here, this is the TTFB, total time for first byte. How much times it takes to for the server to actually generate the content and send it to the client, and this matters here. So yeah, our TTFB for this site is 13.35 ms, which is fairly small if we consider the whole page. So if this TTFB is larger in your case, which is more than 100 ms or 200 ms or even 400 ms, you can just concentrate on reducing your server response time. Now let's try to understand which is the LCP that it identified as a largest content. So I'll just enlarge this one. Yeah. In here, if you see this timings tab, this tab has all the metrics registered for this page. So when I click on this is an LCP. This is the first contentful paint. This is the first paint, and this is just the DOM content load event. This is the time. The horizontal is the time. The LCP is nothing but the time taken from FCP, first contentful paint, till this LCP is loaded. So basically here, the LCP was identified as, just open this. If I click on LCP and summary, I can see the node. And when I click on the node, it will tell me this is the image that it identifies as LCP. So again, going back here, and inside the timings tab, whenever you see your LCP is lower, first try to understand which is the LCP it is identified. So this will always be identified as an LCP in future as well. So keep this in mind and try to reduce this time from FCP to LCP. And the other pointer is reducing the TTFB, which is your actual server response time. So let's try to understand how we can reduce the server response time. Yeah, so there are some things that we can do. One is optimize your server. So what do I mean by optimizing your server? Which is if your server has any DB calls, if there are any storage related queries on your server side, try to optimize them. If you can use CDN, go for it. Caching assets on server level caching. So like using Nginx, if you are building something and keeping like HTMLs, so use server level caching for that. Establish third-party connections early. So this is an interesting one where you can just tell the browser that you would want this specific domain to be pre-connected whenever you load this page. So you are telling the browser that you don't. So what do you mean by pre-connect? So if I just go here and show you, this is the time it needed for sending the request. This can be larger in some cases. So you just tells the browser that connect it beforehand, even encountering to any link or any JS bundle. Just connect to this host before anything else. So when I say pre-connect, it means that. And even it is the same thing for DNS prefetch. It makes the DNS lookup faster. So if if after this specific line, if you have any JS content or CSS content or anything which loads from Bootstrap example, if I set this Bootstrap CDN host and set it as DNS prefetch, the browser will know that this is the specific DNS and the DNS lookup will be faster. So this is a very powerful thing that you can do for establishing third-party connections earlier. And the second one is deferring third-party JS. So this is a little bit tricky one, because you would have to find out which is the JS that you don't need on this page, which is the JS that you don't need on this above the fold page. And you would have to divide this JS and chunk it into different JS chunks and then load them. So if there are multiple assets, if your Webpack or if your any build tool generates multiple assets, multiple JS files, load first which only matters to your page first, and all the other JS can be loaded in a deferred way.
So can you give me one more example of DNS prefetch?
Okay, so I'll just show you a sample code here. Yeah. So this is the tag basically, and this DNS prefetch would be example your cdn.bootstrap.com, and here your import would be basically, which is example.
So both are different, pre-connect and prefetch.
Yes.
Pre-connect is just connection.
Yes.
And
This is a connection that the browser makes before even loading the page. First thing that it does. And DNS prefetch is the first part of any connection is DNS lookup. So if you are mentioning all your different hosts in your list, the browser will make sure that the DNS is looked up for all of these domains.
okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Now going ahead, let's try to understand how we can improve the render blocking JS and CSS. So why does this matter? Let's try to understand why does reducing this JS and CSS blocking time matters. If we go again back to performance here, and you can see the timings here. So these are smaller chunks that the JS needed to actually load and actually run your JS and actually run your CSS. Before doing that, the browser does not render or load your page. And that is why we have to make sure that our JS is JS size is smallest as possible, and our CSS size is smallest as possible. That is the reason that we suggest that to reduce the CSS and JS blocking time. So yeah, so minifying is, I think I would say that it is one step before compression. Compression goes one step ahead and compresses all of your text basically.
Yeah.
So one is minifying the JS that we just discussed, and other one is just remove unused JS if it is not used in this page, in this specific page. So you only load whatever is needed for this page, whatever the CSS is needed, whatever JS is needed. So there are many ways for CSS as well. For CSS, you can again minify and compress, like for JS, we can do that. And like we said, there are multiple ways to defer the load of non-critical CSS. So it is called non-critical CSS. Again, it refers to the CSS needed for the above the fold page. So if I go in on this page, and whatever the CSS is needed for this specific section, I would make a different bundle of that. This is one way, making a different bundle of this specific CSS, and then load it first, and load all the other CSS in a deferred or async. So this CSS would be loaded later on, which is below the fold. The other way is not to use a different CSS file and just keep it in inline. So there are multiple tools, build level tools as well, that we can use, which keeps the CSS inside your style tag. The third one, which was slower resource load times, which is again resource as in you can talk about assets here. And how do we improve that? Let's try to understand that. We have covered some of the things here, which is compression of the text files, which is again CSS and JS. Preloading important resources. Again, the important is which deals with the above the fold page. The third one is optimizing and compressing images. Most of our pages use images no matter what, how much we control, but they use images. That is why we have to always use optimized images, optimized formats. There are some newer formats which can be used, which is WebP, which is for images. WebM is for videos. One of the things that Google suggests is that don't use the image in the above the fold overall. Try to use as many vector images as you can, because vector images are lowest in size as compared to the actual images, and they can be even inlined in your page. So it is always suggested not to use or least use images on your above the fold, and try to always compress your images. Always use responsive images. What do I mean by responsive image? Is what you show on web cannot be the exact same thing you show on mobile. The mobile version can be always reduced to some size, some specific size, so that the size is some specific dimension, so that the size is lower. It can be cropped for sure, and that can be achieved by using image source set.
Yeah, compression and image source set. Image source set is specifically useful for rendering those images on different, optimizing for mobile versus desktop, optimizing the same image so that you won't end up pulling in a large image even for a mobile and compress it and show it as small icon.
Yeah. And you can automate this part as well as a part of your build step. Again, you can use multiple tools to compress images once you add it into your asset. They will always compress images and convert images if you want to all the WebP, which are newer formats, which are very efficient from size perspective, and always load the compressed ones.
There are a lot of SaaS products also which
Yeah.
could do that. So even if your file is stored in, let's say, S3 or somewhere, you can always front it with some other SaaS product like IMGIX, or there are various other alternatives,
Yeah.
and they can optimize the image. Like you can ask for a specific size from the code, and you don't have to do anything about it. You just have an image.
Size, crop,
Yeah.
anything. There is one called Image Magic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I faced a problem with one of our client, that we had to load a video in background, and when first fold, the whole first fold,
Mhm.
and which was taking like 2 seconds to load itself. Even though compressing down to 300 KB, and still it was taking too much time. So that is what I was, I started when we started this conversation. And that's how that is what our challenge is. How to balance that,
Correct.
You have to keep video because that's client's requirement, and then you cannot compress below 300 KB. If we do, quality is so bad that it will hamper user experience. And then what are other techniques that we can use to slow resource load times? Now compression is done, and even server timing is done. Now what other techniques can you use, or you have any idea around it?
So another question I would ask: did you use CDN for that loading that video?
It's in the list, but not yet, because currently website is on another server altogether. So not yet pointed, but yes, that's in the list.
Mhm. So yeah, I think there are two things again that we can see is if the time is needed on the server side or on the client side. Server side things can be solved by CDN mostly, and the client side again, if the size is larger, the browser will get hit with that. That is for sure. I mean, we cannot go around that. I have not worked on specific videos, but like you said, image was one of our concern about the fold, which was a large image, and we had to show that image. So there was one way which we tried to do is we loaded a very lowered down resolution version of that image first. So there was it was of 1 or 2 KB, which can be loaded easily, and it had a onload event, and when the image or everything loads, then the actual image was asked for. So we did that in that case. So is this possible anything in your web page?
So actually, yes. Even for video, what I used to do was even for video, I used to load an image first. A lower resolution one, so it looks like something is loading up, and then it loads. So that we have done in past. But in this particular case, or in this particular problem, we cannot do that because it's the first and home page, right?
Yeah.
And it's the video. So
yeah, it's the video.
On image side, I understand we can use lazy loads. We can use different methods to load images, but video is where I'm facing challenge.
Okay.
So I have,
Yes.
So in one of the projects, we have a video right on the home screen. Like the first fold itself, you have the whole background as a video, and in uh, in that the video itself is around 2 MB. But then having a CDN and aggressive cache on that really helps, and it is blazing fast. I mean, you can hardly see any latency on a
Really, 2 MB video.
2 MB video. Yes,
Yeah. So
Yes, I
CDN and
think.
cache, right?
Yeah.
CDN and caching. Yes, public caching mostly. And if your video is even more bigger, then a CDN which could support streaming, that would help. So instead of downloading the full video, it just acts like streaming a video to the web browser. So it doesn't have to load for the full video to load. It can start playing as soon as some bits of it are already available. So streaming is one other thing that you should watch out for. If not CDN, then if you cannot go for CDN, then if your web server can support streaming and just start playing the video as soon as some content is available.
Right. Thanks. Thank you very much. So these are 3 options, right? CDN, cache, and streaming.
Yeah.
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 If
Okay.
you do
we'll try
all
that.
3, then it would be lazy.
Prefer doing all 3 for sure. And on the staging, so we cannot reveal the client and all those things because it's still under beta. But on staging link, I just checked the page speed inside, and the score is 94 with video of 2 MB.
Oh,
Nice.
great.
Yeah, CDN solves a lot of problem actually of asset problems.
Right. We'll try that. Like that. Let's see what happens. Because my what we are using video is around 1.2 MB or something, and then we dropped it down to 600 kbs, and still we are 600 to 300 kbs. Then still we are facing issues. So that comes first, and then image is taking time, then JS, then CSS. So and then other assets. So other assets are also taking time like 43 milliseconds or something like that.
Which type of a video format are you using now?
So I don't remember as such, because I worked on like 3 days ago on it, but I don't remember as such which format it was. But for images, we are using WebP, so that is I'm sure of, and maybe MP4 or something.
You can try WebM for video.
Yeah, that's what I picked up on this. I will do that. So now I have 4 solutions. I will try all 4 and see. Thanks.
So yeah, that concludes how we can improve LCP, how we can debug an issue of an LCP metric, and yeah, what is LCP? Any more questions on LCP, not just full paint? Any? Okay. The next one is first input delay, which focuses on the load responsiveness. Let's try to understand what is this metric. This is a little bit bigger definition, but yeah. So FID measures the time from when a user first interacts with a page to the time when the browser is actually able to begin processing event handlers in response to that interaction. Okay. So the first interaction with a page of a user and how much time it takes to actually to give a response to the interaction. Does anyone understand this? We'll go in detail again. So these are much simpler things to remember, I think, which is FID only measures the delay in event processing. It does not measure the event processing time itself, nor the time it takes the browser to update the UI. So when a page is loaded, as you can see here, when a page is loaded, and when I click on this, how much time it takes from the click to actually register and start the event processing, that matters here for FID. Is that clear? So let's try to understand what are the first inputs here. So the inputs can be clicks, taps, key presses, anything, and it does not consider the scroll. So when the page loads, if I click or tap or anything or any key press, how much time it needs to react on that. Okay. When does the input delay happen? So when will the input delay happen? So let's go into that as well. It generally happens when when the browser's main thread is busy doing something else, and that is why it cannot respond to the user. So you have given the browser a lot of work to do while the page is loading in between, so that the user, whatever user is trying to interact with, it is not able to carry out. So that is the reason that the page becomes a little bit unresponsive if there are many things happening in the browser. And again, this covers most of the things that we covered in the previous one as well. But yeah, let's try to understand in detail what this specifically is. Considering these are network requests here, this is the first request, and there are multiple concurrent requests happening, and these are the network requests. And this is a browser's main thread. Again, you can see here there are smaller chunks happening. This is again JS execution time. So this is again, it is taking too much of time. This is taking time. These are smaller chunks. And this is where the FCP is, which is first contentful paint. So this is where the user can see our page. Okay, this is where the user can see our page. Now, in between this time, if user starts to interact with the page and it takes time, how much time it takes is the time the FID score is counted. So this whole time, where from the first contentful paint this till this end of the main thread being idle for 5 seconds, is the TTI, time to interaction. So if the user does something in between here, we call it as a FID. So example, browser is busy doing something here, and in that time only we specifically click on a specific user input. The browser will obviously not respond to our request because it is actually doing something else, and that this time would be added as FID. Is that clear enough?
Can promises can improve this or something?
Yeah, right. Good. Yeah. So this count is not, again, this count is not how much time you need for the actual execution after the click.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it is not counting how much time it needs when you click a specific page, a specific button, and the content it loads. No, it counts how much time it needs for the browser even to start working on that event,
Okay. Okay.
right? So
So
let's
it's not about our code, it's about the
exactly.
browser application.
Exactly. But still, again, it is about our code only, because
Yeah.
we are keeping this execution time bigger,
Yeah.
and that is leading the browser to be keep busy with that execution and not letting the user to interact with. So yeah, like you said, in some way it is not directly related to exactly what we do on that specific event, but overall JS execution. FID is a metric that can only be measured in the field, as it requires real user interaction with your page. And that is the reason FID cannot be seen in the lab. You can just see two metrics here, which is LCP and CLS. But in field data, you can see FID as well. But now the question would be, how do we debug them on our dev environment if lab data does not gives us the this thing FID? So like we saw earlier, lab data can give us TTI, or total blocking time, as well. So this is the total blocking time. If we reduce the total blocking time, here you can see here total blocking time, then it is mostly assumed that your FID will also improve in the field data. So on your lab or in your dev environment, you can focus on reducing this total blocking time, so that eventually your FID score will be improved. Let's just jump into that as well. First, try to understand how much is good score and needs improvement and poor. So FID of 100 milliseconds is considered good. More than that, we'll always need an improvement. So yeah, main reason of FID being larger is heavy JS execution. So as we saw earlier in the diagram that there are multiple JS executions happening. That is why the user was not able to interact with the input. So what we can do for that? We can break up long tasks. So here your asynchronous can come in place, where you don't have multiple chains of multiple chains of fetches that you have, so that your one task becomes a huge task. You can try to break up in multiple asynchronous fetch calls, so that it does not become a whole different whole long task and multiple smaller tasks in between. There is one chat. How to fix render blocking? So I think the render blocking is mostly related to the LCP that we discussed earlier. If we do all of those things, your render will not be blocked and your LCP score will be high, because you're talking about the time required before even starting the render, right, Akshada? Yeah. So if you make sure that your LCP score is in the good range, then your render blocking will be in better way as well. Does that answer your question, actually? I hope it does. Okay, I'll just move on. If you have any questions again, then you can just directly message. Yeah, so concentrating on FID here, we are trying to break up long tasks. Optimize your page for interaction readiness. So what does that actually mean? Is again reducing overall JS code size. I think this is a repeated theme here that we should have minimum JS code as much as possible for the above the fold page. Relook at your chunk sizes. So if you are enabling code splitting, make sure that it is enabled on your route based, so that the JS which is required for another routes is not loaded for your route. Again, this is mainly related to JS as well, but this is about execution, JS execution. So less JS will lead into less JS execution time. So we should always concentrate on reducing the JS here and loading the minimum JS as much as possible.
So we can take advantage of jQuery sort of where we have a ready function on load function something. So ready will indicate that it's need to execute it once the DOM get loaded. So it ready for the interaction, ready for take the input from the user. Something we should means take advantage of that Java jQuery here. Use interaction readiness, so that's why.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think there is not much of the things that we can do here, because in terms of like you said, that we need to understand the if we are making the input interaction ready or no. What we can do is reduce the chunk sizes and reduce the large running tasks. So again, if we have to debug, let's go back here and let's try to see that there were multiple long running tasks here. So you can see this, right?
Yeah.
So if the user was trying to interact in between these executions, it will always take time, no matter what.
Yeah.
Because browser is only busy with running this.
Yeah.
So there are ways to understand which is the JS that is taking so much time. Just a minute. So I think I'm not getting that specific thing, but you can actually try to understand which JS code is taking time here.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So after reducing that, so our scope of interaction will increases.
Correct. Exactly. This is all about initial load. That is it.
Okay.
After the initial load, when your page becomes interactive and then the user starts interacting with it, these metrics does not come in picture. Basically.
Okay.
These metrics are only for the initial load.
Yeah, first lag. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Akshada is asking question. How to optimize unused CSS and JS? Uh, how to deal with Angular for it? Angular is large unnecessarily. So again, there are tools that we discussed earlier that which can you be used for code splitting, and I'm not sure about how Angular handles it, but React has that. I'm sure Angular also should have this kind of thing. And does anyone know in this call, does Angular have code splitting or no? But I think it should have something like that. So these are the only ways basically, Akshata, that we can um, try to optimize the JSS. Keeping the only used CSS and JSS again in the first load that we discussed. Any specific thing that you want to ask, actually? Okay, yeah. So mostly these things only matter. So is that clear for everyone? How we can improve our FID score? Any questions on this? Okay. So this will complete two metrics, which is LCP and FID. Again, any questions on both of this so that we can go ahead with SCLS?
There's a question on chat.
Yeah. How does Instagram or TikTok app handles the data without fail?
Could you repeat that question for the recording?
Yeah. How does Instagram or TikTok app handles the data without fail? What do you mean by without fail, Akshada?
Doesn't crash.
Yeah, it never crashes, but so which are the cases that it crashes? So what are you trying to instead of many users uploading data? So again, it does not load everything at once, right? On your page or anything. So there are multiple different okay, I think I understand what you're trying to say. So example, if you go to Instagram and if I go to my newsfeed, there are like thousands of images, right? So it does not load all the images at once, for sure. It loads according to your scroll. Scroll is again your interactivity with the web page, and it is loaded progressively. So this is one way. There are many different ways. There are many different architectural decisions also that they have taken to reduce the load time.
Yeah, one of the ways, and I know that in React is it has a list view which recycles
Yeah.
as you keep scrolling up or down. Same with Android, they handle it very similarly, where you have a list of thousands of items as Prathamesh said, it's not loaded all at once. It can be paginated. But then even on the view side, if those are image heavy and paint heavy, then those are constantly being recycled. So it may feel like everything is loaded in the feed, but actually in the background,
Yeah.
it'll keep getting recycled.
And it uses in case of native apps, it uses your local storage very heavily for caching.
Yeah.
That is why your app size is like near 2 GB, 1 GB or something. So yeah, there are many different, I think, cache strategies or different strategies that they use. For a fact, I think I know that there is a different type of a image format as well for Instagram. Instagram images are not normal images. If you go on web, I think they have converted into vector image. So that is there. And these metric always dependent on, they always count the first load and for whatever is above the fold. So it is not a overall performance test of a specific website basically. Is that clear, Akshada? Okay, let's move on to the next metric, which is CLS cumulative layout shift. This is the most easy and low-hanging fruit which you can use to just fix it very easily. CLS is an important user-centric metric for measuring visual stability because it helps quantify how often users experience unexpected layout shifts. So this mostly focuses on the unexpected layout shifts. We'll talk about what is unexpected here in a bit, but this all talks about layout shifts here. So this is an example of a layout shift. You see a page, you want to do something else, and then something else pops up and you end up clicking on some other button that you never wanted to click. This is not a bad user experience, as well as this might even lead you to do something destructive action as well. This is a little bit dense here, so stay with me. Layout shift occurs anytime a visible element changes its position from one rendered frame to the next. Okay, I think we get that an element was somewhere else, and in another frame the element moved to somewhere else. That is an unexpected behavior of that element. A burst of layout shifts. Now these layout shifts, this is a layout shift. A burst of layout shifts is when one or more individual layout shift occur in rapid succession with less than 1 second in between each shift and maximum of 5 seconds for the total duration. So there are like multiple shifts happening in less than 1 second. This matter LS metric. So layout shifts which occur after the user interactions are not counted in this metric. So example, when I click, we click on a specific button, and then a element is appeared or an element is shifted, it is not counted in that because that is an expected behavior. because the user has already interacted with that element and it is expecting something to come up. But this only focuses on the unexpected ones that we discussed, that we saw earlier, which is I don't even know that the layout is about to shift and it shifted, which is a very poor page experience for the user. There is one. Okay. So there is a formula to count this. Layout shift score is impact fraction multiplied by distance fraction. So we'll try to understand what is an impact fraction. So as you can see here, this is an element which is 50% covered of this whole viewport. This is the 50% of height is covered with this element. Okay. Now, after shifting in the next frame, it shifted and it went down. Now, it is covering 75% of the whole page. Okay. So, the impact fraction is 75% here, which is 0.75. This is an impact fraction, and the distance fraction is how much this element moved. So in this case, it moved 25%. So this 75 multiplied by 25, 0.75 multiplied by 0.25 is the layout shift score. This is a very a little bit complicated type of a metric formula, but yeah, this is that they have come up with. Any questions on this? Then we can move on to how to improve this. Basically, it is considering two important things, which is the impact of the shift and how much for the distance that it impacted for.
What would be the causes of this
Good and
layout shift? Yeah.
poor that we saw.
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah. What would be the causes of that layout shift?
Yes.
Because of ads in some public websites or something.
Exactly. So causes are many, but I think the solution is one that we can do. Again, this is images without dimensions. If we don't set dimensions for images, the browser will not know that how big of an image it is, and it will not be able to reserve any space for that in the page, and that is why the content below it or above it will be always there. And when the image loads, because the loading of the image will take time because it's a resource, it's a different resource, and then the shift will occur. That is the reason we should always give the dimensions for any image, wherever you are using. This is the same thing with ads, embeds, and iframe as well. Even for ads, we see that there are no specific reserved spaces for ads. And that is why the shift is there. The content moves up and down for the same reason. That is why you should always have dimensions in that case as well. One is that web fonts causing flash out and flash in.
Prathamesh, are you there? Or I think he seems to have lost his connection. Prathamesh? Guys, just wait till we, get him back. Prathamesh, are you there now?
Hello.
Yeah, I think your connection was lost in between.
Oh, when did you lost me, guys?
You were on. Could you just share your screen again?
Yeah,
where you were.
Yeah.
There's also a question on chat.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can. You can come back to this one.
Can dynamic import in JS can be helpful in speed optimization? Yes, it can. Actually, we can discuss this a little bit in later. Let's try to understand the causes of high CLS score. But where was I? Sorry.
Adds, embeds, and iframes without dimensions. I think that is what you were talking about, right?
Okay. Yeah. So again, the adds and your iframes should always have dimensions. Most of the times, most of the times web pages do not reserve sizes for adds, and that is the reason we see the shift. Third one is web fonts flashing in, flashing out. What does that mean is if your page is using a web font, the browser will first try to render your content with the default font if it does not find the actual web font that you are using. And when the web font is loaded, it will apply that new web font to the whole content. And this is again one more reason you can see the flashing and flashing out, or the layout shifts between.
So what should one do for web fonts?
Yeah, again for the web fonts also, this is the same thing that we discussed earlier, which is using preload. You can tell the browser that you have to preload this font as soon as possible, as soon as the page is loaded. This is one thing you can do. And one more is, if there is a section which is to be loaded using the network's response, then the DOM, again the layout shift might happen, which is basically there are two contents, and there is one more dynamic content in between, which is expecting the network response. And when it loads the response from network after some amount of time, it will take the space of that page. This will again cost you the CLS score. So again, how to improve? These are some examples here. Left side, you can see there is a huge layout shift. So this page is loaded, and then this ad loads. And on the right side, you can see there was always ad space reserved. It showed a gray area, and then it loaded the actual ad. But for the user, there was no any surprise. It was a expected thing. So this is what you can do to improve the poor CLS. Giving the dimensions mostly solves the problem. Reserving space again for the ads if they are not loading, because ads are generally loaded after some time only. So you will have to reserve the space for that. So yeah, I think this is all you can do for improving the CLS score. Any questions?
Means yeah, it will be easy to when you have static
Mm-hmm.
sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But in case of Facebook, any social media where they have AdSense or anything which keeps keeps getting the ad on a dynamic manner. So in this case, how they
So
calculate these things, width
so
and
in
height.
that case also, I think
Yeah.
they always have a specific ad space reserved. So they know that they are going to show an ad. They are just not sure which ad they are showing because it's a dynamic loaded ad. So you will always see that content block there, but the ad is not loaded, and then it will load in just some amount of time.
Yeah, means they reserve space for ads.
Exactly.
Okay.
And even for images also, they have in case of Facebook, they have specific layout fix that in this timeline this would be the height and width of the image. Then that is always reserved, and whenever the image loads, it loads.
So this
Okay.
concludes to, I mean, say for example, the on screen.
Arshad, your voice is very low, I think.
Yeah.
Am I
Voice
audible
is
now?
very low.
Yeah. So the website you're showing on screen is kind of magazine
Mhm.
website, right?
Mhm.
What happens in magazine website? I have seen, I've worked
Mhm.
on such project once. So see the size, if we fix size and add Google Ads. So sometimes what happens is dynamically it loads a altogether different size of ad in that space, and then maybe ad will not look good, or ad will do the shift. So this happens even after fixing the dimensions of ad space. I have
So
seen it. Actually,
I think mostly people use iframes, right, for the ad. That is one of the ways.
so yes, iframe, I understand it. It goes behind that whole frame, and ads are not visible. But even in iframe, if we use iframe, then it will not hamper CLS or it score, because iframes are definitive, right? It will hamper only ad experience. So that is a different part altogether.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But
Correct.
when say for example World Vision is written, right? So what if I put a ad block just aside to that from English to Twitter logo, right? So that
Mm-hmm.
will be block of ad.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Maybe I think it has something to do with Google Ads setting, but still it hampers if I put it. What I did was I have added a Google ad there, and it hampered whole header section of it.
Mm-hmm.
Even finding that it should be around what 600 into 200 or 450 into 200 pixels, even though it hampered the whole header part.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how to solve that, and then we decided to just do away with it and maybe put add somewhere else.
Okay. I really think that there should be a setting for this. Has anyone worked on any ads or anything? Because this is suggested in uh, Google's guideline. So I'm not sure.
Actually, yes.
Yeah, generally, I have when I have done or added ads on my page, similar to what Prathamesh said, set up a fixed real estate for that, and it just dynamically loads ad from there. So it does not change the layout as such. And specifically with Google Ads, there are some guidelines wherein you can say that I've reserved this much space to the ad, and they will serve content according to those.
Right.
And I'm pretty sure the other ad platforms will also have the same, because otherwise,
Yeah.
if you reserve, let's say, a wider real estate, and the ad is, on the longer side, then there is obviously no value of showing those ads, because it will crop that section of the ad. So in most of, like, at least in Google, I've seen that you can always say that this is the real estate that we have reserved, and they will serve ads according to those.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, let's see if something comes up again like that.
Yeah.
Probably problem. We will not face that problem.
Yeah, cool. So I think we have covered all the metrics here and the ways to improve the scores of them. There was one question pending from Akshada, which is, can dynamic import in JS can be? Yes, we have used this, and it helped us in some way. What are you trying to achieve here, Akshada? Just the speed of what, basically? Speed of loading or speed of execution? Okay. Yeah, I have used a dynamic header, a dynamic component for in React case for a dynamically rendered component inside a page, which was rendered statically, server side rendered. So in that case, it was very much useful for us, because the content which was loaded in dynamic was dynamic. The drastic differences you have observed, but that was not for improving the performance as such. But yeah, any drastic differences you have observed? No, I mean, we could not see that difference then, because that was not added for this specific reason. Anything else? Anyone? So in our case, Akshada, like I said, we were loading the server side rendering, and that is why we did not have any scope to load any dynamic content. That is why we had to input this specific component inside a page dynamically. That was the only time I have used dynamic. Okay, cool. Anything else? I think that is it then. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thanks, everyone.